Hello. Today I want to talk about the thumb's palette of colors and effects. I want to talk about 4 different effects that you can use with the thumb and that you can incorporate into the pieces you're working on. I'm going to begin with the flesh tone. Most 21st century guitarists use their fingernails to pluck the strings. However, this doesn't mean that using a flesh is out of the question. In fact, evidence suggests that 19th century guitarists used both nails and flesh to pluck the strings, especially when imitating orchestral instruments. So I have a few quotes here from 19th century guitarists that suggest they were using the nail to strike the string as well as the flesh. Fernando Saw wrote in regards to imitating the oboe, "It is only possible to venture on short passages in thirds, intermixing slurred and staccato notes, as the oboe has quite a nasal sound. Not only touch the strings as near as possible to the bridge, but curve the fingers and use the little nail you have to set them in vibration." So a lot of people, I think, have the assumption that guitarists like Fernando Saw were not using their nails, but in fact they were using both their flesh and their nails. Many guitarists of the 19th century were doing this. So how can we use this possibility for the thumb? Now, to do the flesh tone with the fingers is difficult when you have long nails, but we can do this with the thumb and create some pretty cool effects, I think. So all we have to do when we play with a nail tone like this, our wrist is usually curved a little bit in order for that to happen. I mean, it depends on how long your nail is, but if you want to create a flesh tone, just flatten your wrist a little bit, and then you're going to start your attack with the side of the thumb, the fleshy side underneath the thumb down here. Like that. So it's pretty worthwhile, I think, if you want to incorporate this effect into your playing, to practice flesh tone, nail tone, flesh tone, nail tone, and try and use the minimal amount of movement in your hand to do this. So now I'm going to look at a few musical examples where you can apply this effect. So the first is Culia of Florida by Agustin Barrios, just the first 2 measures. So I'm going to play it first with a nail tone. Okay, so now I'm going to use a flesh tone. So the flesh tone has a warm and ethereal quality, much different to the piercing clarity of a thumb nail tone. And it allows you to create multi-layered textures of sound just with the thumb. So I'm going to attempt to do that, demonstrate this for you. I hope you can hear that difference. So with the flesh and then nail, and then if you pluck all of them with the nail, so a second example is Canso del Tiadre, excuse my Spanish pronunciation. So there's a beautiful introduction of 2 measures here that just basically arpeggiates a D major chord. So I'm going to play this first with the nail on the first bass note. I'm going to use the flesh. I actually like using, in this particular example, especially a tasto tone color as well as the flesh tone. You get this sort of harp-like sound, and then now that movement creates rubato, but if you read a lot of 19th century sources about changing the time, altering the time, if you listen to recordings of 19th century guitarists and musicians and pianists and violinists playing, their sense of rubato is completely different to what we do today. So I think these movements and the rubato that they create, it can be very natural and actually enhance the music rather than detract or sound like mechanical or anything like that. So this effect is the thumb rest stroke. I think the thumb rest stroke is neglected a little bit by 21st century guitarists. Preference is usually given to keeping a very still position of the right hand with very little movement, either this way or this way. But to play a thumb rest stroke, it requires your hand to come forward a little bit. So you can practice a free stroke with your normal hand position, and then bring your hand forward to practice the rest stroke. And just find that kind of minimum amount of movement you need to do that effect. So rest stroke, free stroke. So the rest stroke can give you a very powerful, raw, and even explosive quality in the bass. If you want to get that much sound. My string's buzzing quite a bit there, but I'm not using much effort to do that. So if I were to do that with a free stroke, there's just no way I could do that. I could get the same amount of volume. I can't do that with a free stroke. So I'm just going to play a couple of examples for you of this. So Bach's E major prelude from BWV 1006A. So here it is with a free stroke to begin the low E. And now with a rest stroke. So you can get a little bit more power in there. The second example is Toroba's Sonatina in A. So there is the bass line. I did that all with free stroke. Now I'm going to add a rest stroke. So you end up now again with sort of a multi-layered texture of sound here. And it kind of brings out the character of the music a little bit. You've got this kind of cheeky and then this boisterous bass line there. So I like to do that cheeky tasto here and then rest stroke and ponticello for that bass line following. The third effect is the thumb pizzicato. This technique is often indicated in the score, whereas the previous two are usually often not indicated in the score. So I think the previous two effects are really at your discretion to use wherever you feel appropriate. There are a few different ways of doing this, a few different options. So the most common technique is to just place the side of your palm on the strings, and then with the flesh of your thumb, pluck the notes like that. So this can be done on single line melodies, for example in Un sueño en la floresta by Barrios. We have that there. But when applying this to a chord, I like to do this a little differently. So instead of muting the strings down here like that, I like to have my thumb free, my hand free, and just sort of sweeping across the strings with the flesh of my thumb. I call this maybe like a fake pizzicato or something like that. So that's from Turina's Fandaguillo. So I'll do that again. I really recommend listening to Julian Bream's recording because he does that really well. He gets this really energetic pizzicato in that passage there, and you can watch that on YouTube. The final effect I want to talk about is called the twin stroke, or the thumb roll. The twin stroke is a name I came across in Calavaro's wonderful book on technique called School of Guitar. So the twin stroke is an effect that can make playing certain textures much easier. It can give you a lot of sound with a lot more ease. So it involves plucking 2 or more notes with the thumb in one sweep. So in order to execute this, the notes need to be on adjacent strings. So for example, if you have an E and another E an octave above, that you won't be able to do this effect if the E is on the 4th string, like that. It has to be on the 5th string, so that you can do the twin stroke, which is that. So you don't have to move too much. I think your hand can come forward a little bit like that. So here's my normal hand position, and then come forward a little bit just to allow that movement to happen. So one example is Bach's Prelude, again in E major. Now if I do that with my thumb and finger, listen to the difference. Now with a twin stroke. So you can get this kind of deep and resonant tone in there. And the final example is from Capriccio Arabe by Tarrega. The very opening here we have this chord. So what do we do with the chords we have here? One option is you could do what I just did then. You could pluck them all. But you could also do a roll and get this completely different sound there. And again, you could do a roll for that chord too and get more richness and depth in there. So there are some options for you to explore, and I hope you find some ways to apply this to the pieces you're working on. Thanks for listening.